It usually says you started, but it hadn't, so I was just waiting for that to come up. But as it started, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to this hybrid meeting of the Healthier Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which is open to the press and public. The meeting is being broadcast live, and a recording of this meeting will be made available as soon as possible after the meeting has concluded. We welcome the use of Welsh language at the meetings. I have had no requests for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Please can members refrain from using the chat function and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you want to speak. Please remember to keep your microphone muted when you are not talking. Please do not interrupt discussions until you have notified of your intention to speak and are invited to do so. Moving on to the agenda. Item 1. Geraint, do we have any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we got apologies from Councillor Sue Molson.
Okay, thank you, Geraint. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Rebecca, could you please ask members in alphabetical order to state whether they have any interests to declare?
Thank you, Chair. Yep. Start with Councillor Clarkson, please. Councillor Crick?
Nothing. No, I don't. Thank you.
Councillor Faye Jones?
Not to my knowledge.
Councillor Janet Jones?
Nothing to my knowledge.
Councillor Overton?
I don't know whether this is relevant, Rebecca, but I am a carer, an unpaid carer, and I know unpaid carers are included in this report, but as it doesn't stipulate any changes to service, I didn't think that I had an interest, because this is a needs assessment and not a service reconfiguration. So I brought it up in case, but I don't think I do.
No, that's fine, thank you. And Councillor Seaborn, finally.
No, nothing that I'm aware of.
Thank you, members.
Okay, moving on to the main part of the agenda. Agenda item 3, population needs assessment. Before we commence discussions, I would like to welcome Phil Diamond, Head of Regional Partnership, who will be presenting the report today.
Thank you.
I'll now hand over to Phil to give a very brief introduction to the report before we commence questioning.
Thank you, Chair. I've actually prepared a PowerPoint, and it's a short PowerPoint. Should take me about 10 minutes. And with everyone's agreement, would it be okay for me to take you through a few of the prominent points? Thank you very much. I'll share my screen, and I'll just note that my colleague Natasha Harris is also on the call today and shadowing, but I may look to bring Natasha in at some points to update on some of the various work programmes that we take a lead on across the region. So if you bear with me, I'm aiming to share my screen. Can someone please confirm if the PowerPoint is now showing on your screens?
It is.
Yes.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, as I mentioned, I'll try and keep this brief. There's quite a lot of information, but certainly looking forward to answering any questions. And I guess that's the first place to start. The Population Needs Assessment is a statutory duty under the Social Services and Wellbeing Act placed on each local authority to complete. And the arrangements that we have in Gwent is for the Regional Partnership Board, which is represented by the 5 local authorities, authorities and the Health Board to take this forward. So the RPB discharged the duty on behalf of Torfaen Council. However, it is very important that the needs highlighted within the regional assessment reflect the needs in Torfaen, and that's where your comments and your questions will be very helpful. So the PNA has to be signed off by 5 full councils meetings and the Health Board, and that needs to take place by the end of March, and we are working our way through that process. Obviously, before it goes to the full council here in Torfaen, I'm presenting it here to the Scrutiny Committee, and once again, just wanted to highlight our thanks for the opportunity. I did attend a previous scrutiny meeting last week with Lyndon Puddy when he was taking through the sort of an update in terms of the wellbeing assessment required under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And just to say that we have aligned both assessments. They are very similar, and both requirements from Welsh Government. So I just wanted to assure members that there is a joint process. So the biggest factor in terms of this population needs assessment is a positive in a lot of ways, and that is an ageing population. We are all living a lot longer, which is hugely positive, and down to the thanks of our public services, our health boards, NHS, and the wonders of modern medicine. However, with an ageing population will come new challenges, new opportunities as well, might I add, but certainly services will have to change and reconfigure in light of an ageing population. And just you know, 1 or 2 stats there. In terms of the number of people aged 85 and over, we are set to see in the region of a 70 to 80% increase in the number of people, which again is positive, between 2019 and 2043. But what does an ageing population relate to? Well, we are going to see a lot more people living with dementia, purely because we're living longer, and dementia is a priority that's not just the preserve of a local authority or a health board. It's a societal challenge. It's not just an issue here in Torfaen or Gwent. It's an issue right across the globe, and that's where the population needs assessment finds its place. It's about identifying priorities which require partnership working. If I was to highlight every health and social care need across the region, the document would be considerable. However, what we are focused in on are priorities which require collaboration, which require health, social care, voluntary sector, citizens and communities coming together. So obviously it stands to reason that dementia requires a whole society, a whole community approach. Older people, in terms of the data that we have and the number of older people who will be unable to live safely in their own homes, who may struggle with one sort of domestic task, that is set to increase, more so notably in Monmouthshire. Helping people to remain in their own homes safely is a key priority for us, and who wouldn't want to live in their own home for as long and safely as possible. But in terms of older people, we've noticed that the number of calls for ambulances is higher than the Welsh average in some LAs. In terms of the number of people supported through social services, they are per 10,000 population. It is a lot higher in some LAs than the Welsh average, and a lot of people, older people, are highlighting the loneliness agenda as well. And I know that's been a particular priority here in Torfaen. Carers, unpaid carers, Chair, thank you for making known and declaring yourself as an unpaid carer. But what I would add at this point, I think every single one of us will take on some sort of care within our lifetime, whether it's our sort of immediate families or just that looking out for a neighbour in the street. So I think the same with dementia. Every one of us is likely to be touched by dementia, and that we'll know somebody, and I imagine there's quite a few of us on the call here today at this meeting who would have direct experience. I know myself personally with my own grandmother, but I know there'll be others, and that's where the PNA is looking to identify those priorities which affect wide populations and bring partners together. But in terms of carers, we know that the pandemic has exacerbated issues, and I'm not going to go through all the statistics, but number of carers start to highlight that they may have to give up work because of the care and responsibilities. So a recent survey is considerable as well. So we need to ensure that there's sufficient support for our unpaid carers. In terms of mental health, there was a national survey that was circulated across Wales, and it was completed at 2 stages, 2 points in time, in July 20 and March 21. And that was around people's mental health and their own well-being. And in each one of those surveys across local authorities, it was noticed that people's mental health has decreased over the course of the pandemic. And again, that's got to be an issue, long COVID, the impact of the pandemic going forward over the next few years. Children looked after, children right at the edge of care, who may need out of county placements is a huge priority for us across the region. And again, we've seen some large increases in the rest of Wales as well. But there are particularly innovative projects which Torfaen have led on in terms of my service team, recently relocated up into Victoria School in Pontypool. But what we are finding is that there are the number of placements, out of county placements, which are charging in the regions of tens to thousands of pounds per week, is quite high. And the Welsh Government have recently highlighted their agenda to reduce the profit from children's services. As you can imagine, £10,000 to £15,000 a week for a child to be placed out of county is considerable budget pressure for any local authority. So what we're looking to do in this region is looking at developing our own residential units, so that if a child requires a residential placement, we can look to facilitate that here in our region. And the savings there will be cost. It would not be for profit, and any savings can be pumped back into preventative working. Learning disabilities, again, positive that the number of people with learning disabilities are living a lot longer, but again, in terms of our support, that needs to be measured as well. Autism is another key area. When 100 people are on the autistic spectrum, and again, it's about how we work regionally. And that's what the Regional Partnership Board is here to do, is to look at how the 5 authorities and the Health Board can work collaboratively and create synergy, and look at what can be gained by working together as opposed to doing sort of work in isolation. Housing, again, is of particular concern. The number of rough sleepers, you can see on the graph on the right, and that's increased. What we've seen again through the pandemic is number of temporary accommodation has increased. It's almost doubled in Gwent, the number of households requiring those temporary accommodation, and an ageing population will require a different housing approach. And we've also looked at the impact of Disabled Facilities Grant. So I'm looking to stop there. I hope that's been around about 10 minutes. I just wanted to give you a flavour of the needs assessment. It is a considerable document, but it has been tailored and aligned to the Wellbeing Assessment under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. I think that document in itself is around about 500-600 pages. So when you think that the PNA is about 50 to 60 pages at this moment in time, hopefully that's a good indication that we've managed to avoid duplication, because a lot of the information in the Wellbeing Assessment could have found its way into the PNA. So hopefully the documents read well side by side. I'll stop sharing my screen and happy to take any questions or comments.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Phil. I was aware of most of the trends in your presentation. When I was in hospital, a doctor said, "You're a young man." And I said, "I'm not a young man, I'm 50. And he said, "You are, because in the last 10 years, the mean age of inpatients has gone up from 65 to 75 in 10 years. And so I was very aware of that and some of the statistics you presented to us. So we've got quite a rigorous set of questions to ask you this afternoon. So I am going to ask the first question. So the first regional population needs assessment was overseen by the Gwent Regional Partnership Board in April 2016. What did we learn from the development process of the first PNA, and what did we do differently in developing this PNA?
Okay, good question, Chair. I would say that we did not change the process too much. The process for the PNA is stipulated through Welsh Government guidance. Many of the headings that on the slides that I presented are prescribed in legislation. So it is quite an articulated process, you know, a prescribed process. However, what we are sort of set to do with this PNA is build on the foundations of the previous PNA. There's always areas for improvement. We haven't got complacent, and I think what we've looked to do is to put some of that information online. A lot of the information in the PNA was replicated within the wellbeing assessments. So this time round in the PNA, if you may have noticed, there are some boxes which highlight other data which is held elsewhere. So for instance, around children and young people, flying start information or childhood obesity or immunisations is quite important for us to know. But I haven't replicated that information this time round in the PNA. What I've done is been able to signpost to the wellbeing assessment and provide the link so that the information. So what we have learned is that the information is other information is held elsewhere, and we just simply need the signpost, and hopefully people will pick up on the fact that we've used the same colour schemes in the wellbeing assessment as the PNA. So hopefully for the uneducated eye, they could almost become seen as the same document. So that's one change, definite change that was made and we built upon to help improve. And for me, again, it's not so much an improvement, it's just recognising that we had a considerable amount of engagement with the public face-to-face during the first PNA. That has been slightly limited due to the pandemic. However, what will be important following the PNA is the area plan, and where we turn the sort of words into action. And again, I think that at that time we will be then looking to undertake a lot more engagement with citizens, etc. So there's been definitely conscious effort, and we have engaged, whether it's with carers, with people with dementia, etc. But that has been impacted on by the pandemic.
Thank you, Phil. The next question is from Councillor Clarkson.
Good afternoon. The question I'm raising is regarding paragraph 3.3 of agenda item 3, and the sort of statement that the identified need was used to develop the regional area plan. So the question is, did the identified need contribute to effective delivery of the regional area plans and the partnership priorities? And was that identified need accurately reflected in the needs as they arose over the last 5 years? So how well did the last PNA sort of perform, really?
Yeah, I mean, the area plan, a bit like the PNA, is a statutory document which brings health and social care partners together. Previously, without the Social Services Act, any working between social care and health would have been, at the, down to the relationships. It wasn't mandated. So what the area plan has enabled, or what that does, it brings health and social care around the table to produce a plan, which they both sign off, and they have to agree. So that facilitates joint working. It also helps to identify joint issues and joint outcomes which both partners need to achieve. Again, there's quite a bit of legislation that comes out of Welsh Government, and the area plan had to be produced by 2017. Just at within 2017, we have the different legislation called the Healthier Wales, again, and that was building on elements of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act. So I would say, yes, the area plan has been very effective in bringing partners together to work to a single plan, and it has facilitated joint working, but it's due to the length and breadth of some of the legislation that comes through, sometimes the area plan if I'd be honest with you, I think sometimes people forget maybe the area plan because more recent guidance has come out. So there's been a challenge to ensure that actually the area plan needs to be monitored, it needs to be delivered. And we've done that and we've highlighted that through our annual report. The RPB has to produce an update on that. But plans are only as good as the people you have around the table, the commitment, the relationship with partners. So that needs to be recognised as well.
Thank you for the answer.
Janet,
Thanks, Chair.
do you think that Phil has answered your question or
Yes.
do you want to re-question him about it?
No, I think he's answered some of the questions, so we can move on because you don't want duplication.
No, I thought not, Janet. Okay, so Rose, Councillor Seaborn, you're next, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, were there any major areas of need that weren't identified in the first PNA? And if so, how can we be sure that we have avoided missing areas of need in this PNA?
I suppose the obvious one was COVID, and I know it's been quite recent, but who could have predicted the recent 2 years? The PNA was aimed to sort of cover the period 2016 up to 2022. So that would be the obvious place. In terms of any unmet need, I think it's permutations of need. I think it would be a big slight on local authorities and health boards if there was any surprises in terms of need. There's established need. We know that mental health, in terms of the impact that have, it was an issue 10, 20 years, and it'll probably be a factor in 10, 20 years in the future. In terms of people's health, etc., whether it's physical health and just implications of getting old as well. That's always going to be a factor. Substance misuse, again, it was an issue 10, 50 years ago, and it'll probably be an issue in the future as well. So in terms of the needs, I don't think there was a huge no, I wouldn't say there was a huge number of unmet needs that we weren't aware of, COVID being the largest, but needs change because obviously substance misuse needs 50 years ago may have been more around alcohol and smoking. In this day and age, it might be down to energy drinks. So the need is there, but it changes slightly, and I think that's something that we need to recognise and cannot be complacent about.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Chair.
Would Councillor Fay-Jones like to ask the next question, please?
Yes, hi Phil. Just like to ask you why we took a separate approach in grants to a separate area for autism. and why did we take this approach?
Sorry, Councillor, there was a bit of an echo, but I think I picked up the question. It was in relation to autism and why we took a separate approach. Yeah, well, autism was featured previously under the mental health agenda, and that was set by Welsh Government. But when you speak to specialists, colleagues who lead on autism, they don't think it's helpful that autism is classed as a mental health problem, an issue or a challenge. So it was at the request of colleagues in the Health Board and Integrated Autism Service to say actually it is an area in its own right, and that's why we wanted to separate it and give it that focus as well. I think maybe if it was just seen under the mental health agenda, some of that focus may have been lost. And that's why we were keen to ensure that it had its own section and in its own right. We've also been working with a group of parents of children with autism recently. We have a regional group, and again, we want to recognise autism in its own right by having its own regional approach. There has been a recent code of practice that has been issued by Welsh Government, setting out standards on what should be in place for people around autism, around diagnosis, how we help families where children have had a recent diagnosis. And again, there seems to be such an important area that it merited its own sort of section within the PNA just to highlight and focus on that.
Okay, thank you. Do you think there's anything else that we perhaps lump together that we should be doing differently as we do with autism?
I think mental health and learning disabilities sometimes get grouped together, but when you actually look at the work that's taken forward, it is focused and separate. Housing was not within the PNA, it's not stipulated, but we wanted to create our own section once again to highlight the need and the importance, and we have a regional housing board as well. Children and young people is an area I'm glad that has a focus. So yeah, I'm just trying to think. I think it's about right where we have it. I think pulling out autism and housing, give their own individual section certainly helps.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That was really helpful, actually.
You admitted, sorry, Veronica. Councillor Veronica Crick, like to ask your question, please?
Thank you, Richard. No, I was just saying I thought that was a really helpful answer just then. I hadn't appreciated quite how important it was to separate autism, and I hope that's what's happening elsewhere in the UK. My question relates to paragraph 4.1, and you sort of touched on it when you were speaking to Councillor Seaborne's question, but just to draw it out a bit more, what impact did the COVID pandemic have on the validity of the data in the last PNA? You're probably still looking at that, I should imagine, but it'd be helpful to know.
I mean, in one sense, we've had a lot more up-to-date information available. As you can imagine, with the pandemic, there would have been a huge amount of research, such as I highlighted with the Carer Survey, the Mental Health Survey that was undertaken by Welsh Government and Swansea University. So actually, the national research and data has been a lot more readily available and for us to sort of get our hands on and reflect on, which has been useful. I mean, you wouldn't have thought that really, but yeah, I would actually say that that's been helpful. Also, within the pandemic, you know, the need to act responsively is hugely important. So even local data, for instance, across the region, and there's no surprise to anybody on the call, for instance, the Health Board will be monitoring the number of admissions daily, the number of discharges. We've been monitoring the number of vaccinations, etc. But in social care, we've been monitoring on a weekly basis the request for domiciliary care, and unfortunately where we have been unable to meet the sort of requests as well. So I would actually say that this, in the middle of a pandemic, it has been quite easy to get hands on some information. I'm not sure if that's answered your question. Is there anything else you'd like to expand on? Me to expand on?
I suppose looking back, which is what you're really doing, aren't you, when you're pulling the P&A together and then taking it forward to the next stage. Do you think there's any areas that, because of COVID, have become skewed and you need to look at what you might think will be the norm in the future?
Yeah, I think obviously, you know, mental health, loneliness agenda, the effects on people with learning disabilities certainly been exacerbated. Carers, for instance, as we know, would have been massively affected through the pandemic. So actually, these issues will not disappear when infections rates drop. The term long COVID is well used now, and we don't totally understand what effect that will have, but we know it will have some factor. So yeah, it is going to skew the data. I would imagine, you know, in terms of schooling, children and young people, etc., missing school, for instance, around education. But again, that's around safeguarding as well. You know, schools would have been a safe haven for some of our children and young people where they've been in regular contact as well. So yes, we will be expecting, I guess, definitely an increase in some of those areas and the needs. And I guess it's possibly something that we probably need to monitor more regularly. For instance, the P&A, the suggestion is that we review it at a halfway point, which would be, say, 2.5 years. Maybe we need to be looking at more of an annual review of this data, given that we've just gone through a pandemic. I'm going to write that down actually as a note. I think it'd be a useful point to raise with the RPB actually.
Thank you.
No, thank you. I think that's give me an action to take forward. Thank you.
Good.
I'm going to ask the next question, Phil. It is something that we have touched upon, but I am going to ask the question in order for you to elaborate or provide extra information on the question. So it is the 2022 P&A report, Appendix Item 1, will also align, integrate and cross-reference the Gwent Wellbeing Assessment. How will the two dovetail and how will it avoid duplication?
I guess there's no secret here. The way to avoid duplication is for me to sit down with the PSP colleagues and to ensure that doesn't happen. So that takes place regularly through a regional meeting, GSWAG, Gwent Strategic Wellbeing Assessment Group. Lyndon Puddy chairs it here on behalf of the region. So I know it sounds quite simple, but we ensure that duplication is avoided by meeting regularly to discuss issues which are coming up and being presented through the PSB and looking at where they fit best. I actually think the real work is going to start post-April, because actually that's when we will sit down with PSB colleagues and start looking at the actions. And that's where we need to be quite clear on the role of the RPB, where they take forward actions, whether it's around the carers agenda or delivering the Welsh Dementia Action Plan, and ensure that the PSB are not also trying to pick up those agenda items. And so it will be through regular meetings with officers where they align, as I've kind of alluded to, is that we will not duplicate the same information in both documents. There might be elements of where, you know, it's quite similar information to stress a point, but what we will be looking to do is signpost between the documents. but it will be something that we could revisit and bring back to yourselves in the future date, because we will be looking for your agreement and comment on the action plans, the area plan and the wellbeing plan that follow, and you will certainly be able to hold us to account to ensure that there is no duplication. So we have this opportunity to come back to you as well, and for you to tell us and to give us those checks and balances to make sure it's not duplication as well.
Okay, thank you. That was a very thorough answer. Veronica, would you like to ask the next question, please?
Yes, thank you. They are interrelated in many ways. The number of the graphs and the tables that you have produced are using data that's a number of years out of date. You know, obviously we're looking at the 2001 census, 2008 figures, etc., etc. How can we be sure of the accuracy of those forecasts contained within the PNA on that basis, and when you start to think too of the impact that COVID will have had again with skewing?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's something I should have really highlighted is when I was asked previously about the challenges of the PNA. Some of the data that we use is the most up-to-date information available. Unfortunately, it could be 10 years out of date. We would have loved to have used the recent census information that was completed. That's not due to be published, preliminary information actually, until next month. So the PNA is limited in the sense that some of the information may not be totally up to date. But what we've tried to do is avoid putting all our eggs in one basket and just basing our sort of priorities based on just information. What I think is important to do is to triangulate the trends, upwards or downwards in terms of needs, with actually what is very important is the citizen's voice. So if you think of something like an area of dementia, yes, the trend line is improving. We are due to see more people living with dementia. But we've got to also balance that with what do people tell us? Because this plan needs to make a difference to citizens, all citizens. Now, if people through our engagement are also telling us that dementia is an issue and is causing stress, anxieties, etc., okay, well, actually, we've got a trend line which is going in the wrong direction. We've got citizens' voice, but also what are the drivers from Welsh Government, because Welsh Government will set expectations on local authorities. So between those three different factors, we feel that we are able to get to a point where the emerging needs are fairly accurate. So I guess the point in relation to your question, yes, it would be great to have more up-to-date information, but by balancing that with what people tell us and what Welsh Government drivers are, hopefully that gives us a sort of a holistic view in terms of identifying that need.
Okay. Janet, your next question has been touched upon. Do you wish to ask it, or have you received a
information?
Have you received an appropriate answer already?
Just highlight, Phil, my question was about the relation to the housing, the additional section which you answered. Are we going to sort of consider, I think I heard you say, but just want some confirmation of sort of more housing possibly for disabled people?
Yes, The Disabled Facilities Grant is available across Wales and here in Torfaen and other local authorities, and that's a grant available to people to help improve their home and add adaptations. So it could be a stair lift, it could be a handrail, it could be a bathroom aid, and unfortunately, it has been affected recently due to the pandemic, as you can imagine. The number of jobs that have been able to be completed because of people isolating, but unfortunately as well due to the cost of building materials. And even alluding that maybe Brexit and the checks there have caused an issue as well. So that is why it's been it's emerging as a need as a region because of those factors. But yes, a big priority and a huge emphasis for the RPB is to help people to remain in their own home for as long as possible and as safely as possible, and that has a big part of it.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. That's really good to hear, because obviously I might expect my fellow councillors who've got issues for some of our elderly people who are really struggling at the moment. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, Faye Jones, do you have a supplemental?
No, not really. I was just going to say that Rose's question should go.
Yeah, Rose has missed out.
Oh.
So we've done a reversal, Richard.
Oh,
Not
sorry,
a problem,
yes.
Chair.
I'm sorry, Rose. Would
Not
you
a
like
problem.
to answer your question? I scrolled too far down on the other device.
Yes, my question is question 10, and it refers to paragraph 3.4. And the last bullet point in 3.4, the PNN references violence against women. I know this is high numbers, but should this not cover all forms of domestic abuse, including same-sex men, violence against children and elders?
Yes, I totally agree. And the wording within the report has just been lifted from the PNA guidance. I think actually the whole agenda will cover everybody in terms of violence. You know, nobody should suffer violence. Where it's slightly lacking in detail within the PNA is that we have a Vowder SV board, that we have a Vowder SV legislation, separate legislation, and that work is actually being sort of driven through the Public Service Board. So it's a bit of an anomaly that that is an area for us to pick up in the PNA, because it has its own separate legislation and framework and governance in a Public Service Board. So I can certainly find out more information and point you in the direction of the regional coordination. We know it has a factor in terms of children's safeguarding and mental health as well, so there will be lots of crossover work, but the emphasis and the focus of that work is picked up at the Public Service Board, just as additional information.
Thank you, Chair.
Right. So we've asked. So Janet has asked question 11. Question 12. Veronica, please.
Thank you, Chair. This relates to 4.1 again. To mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and long COVID. I know we've talked of that as we've been going through, but do you consider that we've accurately accounted for the potential impact from the COVID-19 pandemic in the new PNA? How will we mitigate impacts such as future service budgetary constraints and/or consequences of financial pressures which are starting to appear on our population?
I think in terms of the impact of the pandemic, going back to previous points, some of it will be unknown, and I think what we need to ensure is that we regularly revisit these priorities and the impacts. I think it's safe to say that mental health certainly would have been impacted, and as I've mentioned, the toll on unpaid carers, for instance, as well. So the only way we can really ensure that it's accurate is by going back to it, is not waiting another for 5 years. And the need to do the next P&A. So I think, by revisiting some of those priorities on an annual basis, and I know frontline services will be picking up on this almost daily in terms of their assessment. So I think the fact that it features within the P&A means that we have to report on it, that we are answerable to yourselves, but also Welsh Government, because once it appears in the P&A, we will have to produce an annual report for Welsh Government, and they will be asking us, okay, well, you've highlighted the impact of COVID-19, so what? What have you been doing? So there will be points in time where we will have to highlight progress and challenges, and I think that will be where we will be reassessing the impact of COVID-19. It might be that mental health has suffered a great due to the pandemic, but in 6 months, 12 months time, it might be something else. It might be something more physical. We may learn that, touch wood, hopefully not, but there might be some consequences of people, living with COVID that we're not aware of today. But I think we just need those opportunities in time to keep coming back to that. But we also know that in terms of your budgetary pressures, good question, there has been a considerable amount of funding made available through Welsh Government during the pandemic, whether it's for PPE and etc. But we also have here at our disposal, there are Regional Partnership Board, a Regional Integration Fund, which is a new fund that has been developed and launched this month. It builds on the old integrated care funding and transformation funding that was available to RPBs, but that has been very much utilised to help core delivery of services, as well as across the health board and social care, and also it was being used as part of our winter plan in effect as well. And it's a considerable amount of money in terms of it's in the region of £26 million per year across the region. So you can imagine that there can be a lot that we can achieve with that. And I know the elected member, Councillor Daniels from Torfaen, who is a member of the RPB, has certainly highlighted that, along with other elected members across the region, that this funding has helped stabilise some core service.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm going to ask the next question, Phil. Phil, the RPB will once again work alongside Public Service Board partners to ensure alignment with wellbeing plans required under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, as well as linking to the local authority corporate plan and the Health Board integrated medium-term plan. What level of engagement will the senior leadership team have to ensure alignment with our current and developing plans, such as our corporate plan?
Well, I've just had the name drop of Councillor Daniels, but that would be our first point of contact to ensure that the needs of the PNA reflect and link in with the corporate improvement plan. Obviously, as well, the Director of Social Services, currently Keith Rutherford, for a few more weeks before he retires, but we'll also be linking in with Jason O'Brien as well, is picking up the Director responsibilities. So not just through Jason, but through the heads of service, through Jill Pratlett, again, for a limited time before Sarah Paxton come in. So we will link with all strategic leaders in the individual local authority. And let me reassure you, they don't just wait for me to contact them. They will be sort of highlighting to me, Phil, this is an issue here in Torfaen. This needs to be addressed at a regional issue. We need the help of regional partners here. We need a regional solution to some of this as well. So very proactive approach through Torfaen senior leaders, and that would be where we would look to sort of ensure that the links are made with the local authorities' own plans.
Yeah, thank you. Before you said a very proactive approach, that was the thought that came to my mind, and so you took the words out. You took the words out of my mouth there. So thank you very much, and we'll go on to the next question, who is from Faye, please.
Hi again. Can you hear a terrible echo?
Yes, it's echoing. It's echoing when you speak, Faye. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I don't know why.
That's better now, I think.
Oh, that's better. That's good. Oh, perhaps it's where I'm sat. Right. Okay. My question is, what level of engagement did we set for those forums and for citizens? How can we be sure we have reached everyone that we need to reach?
Well, that's a good question and very difficult. To be honest, I could spend a whole year engaging with the public and I still wouldn't be satisfied if I was doing it 5 days, 7 days a week for a whole year, because there will always be some people that we don't manage to meet with. We linked in with the Public Service Board around the engagement, and again tried to avoid duplication. The Public Service Board, through officers actually here in Torfaen, have led on the development of a survey that has gone out and has been completed by 1,500 people, and that has highlighted a whole raft of needs and issues, right from environment and employment to health and social care. So we've tapped into that survey and we have pulled out the needs of health and social care. And I believe there was over 1,500 individual responses around health and social care. So that gives us a good indication of the needs, and we have certainly looked to reflect that within the PNA. And I think the answer for me really is not for it to be at a point in time. I think, well, engagement and co-production is continuous. It's not just about obviously speaking to a person and saying thank you very much and then going away. If we're doing true co-production, there should be a constant dialogue with the citizen, and I think that's the approach that we will look to take and try to ensure that we do cover and speak to as many different people. So in terms of the PNA, yes, it has been limited with the pandemic, but I would certainly be looking to pick up that engagement more so with the area plan, because actually, like I said, that's probably a little bit more important in the sense, because that's going to be about the action and responses. So in terms of that going forward, I think really for me it's about ensuring that we link with as many different groups on a constant and regular basis. We have a regional citizen panel here in Gwent, and that meets monthly. That's an opportunity for me to link in with citizens and carers, but also other citizen groups. You know, for instance, we link in with the officers who coordinate the Regional Youth Forum, and we take advantage of those existing groups as well. So I think it's what, dare I say, it's one of those impossible tasks, really. But I think for me, it is hugely important, and I hope that the PNA highlights the importance of the citizen's voice. And what we've tried to do within the document is highlight what people have told us directly at different sections and give as much strength to that as a citizen's voice as a line on a graph.
No, sorry. Can I just ask, do you share the results of your PNA with research groups and bodies such as the Joseph Rowntree groups? Because, you know, there's a lot of social things going on there. We don't always have the money to tackle all the areas that we find there's a need for. So I just wondered who we feed into with that, or who could be fed into.
Yes, another statutory duty is for us to publish the PNA on the local authority website once it's been completed, and Welsh Government will regularly direct people to our PNA. I've had different requests from a whole number of national organisations. The Wales Voluntary Council for the Blind was the most recent contact only a few weeks ago. I'm meeting with someone from T Haven next week. The Children's Hospice, again, the contact came through the PNA, which was on the website. So that's how we try to ensure it. But again, there's always opportunities to improve that communication, and we will share it with all partners on the RPB for wider dissemination.
Thank you.
Janet, would you like to ask the next question, please?
Yes, I will. But my system's gone down a minute, so if you bear with me, Phil, like onto my other phone, I can another question. It's basically how will the regional plan and the services available be promoted to our residents?
Another good question. It came up recently, actually, at the regional partnership communication and marketing of the services and what we actually do. As an RPB, we are fairly established. We've been meeting for the last 5 years, but unfortunately, I wouldn't be very confident if I walked into Tesco's Pontypool tonight and asked people whilst they're walking in if they've heard of the RPB. So we know there's a huge amount of work, and that's echoed across Wales, and that's also with the Public Service Board. I know that was a comment that came from elected members there. So we will be looking at how we can promote ourselves a lot more. And whether that's through communication. We have website presence, but we also have a social media presence, but I think that needs to be upped. I think we need to set in place regular updates and contacts, whether it's through themed weeks like Dementia Week and Mental Health Week, Promotion Week, etc. So definitely an area for us to improve on, and that's what we will be looking to do, is work with the Public Service Board. I think they're looking at the communication type strategy, but I think we'll be looking at how we use our local authority, a health board, Facebook, websites, etc. to promote.
Then again, we've still got people who are not used to using IT, so how can we go back to word of mouth notices as well? Yeah.
Definitely, and face-to-face contact. I know when I was promoting dementia-friendly communities here in Torfaen, I went out to the older people forums.
Yes, that's what I was going to say, the older people forums. Thank you.
So they were very helpful to go out to those 4 forums. And yes, face-to-face, definitely, hopefully we can start undertaking a lot more face-to-face contact over the next couple of months.
Well, we'd welcome you to the forum in Blaenavon for the over 50s, because they're very vocal, but they're also very receptive as well. So perhaps in time we'd be able to have a better talk about that. Thanks, Phil.
Yeah, well, I take you up on your offer right now if I could, so definitely.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Janet. Linda, would you like to ask the next question, please?
My question was going to be around how the PNA feeds into the regional plans, but I feel that Phil's given some very good information already about that, and whether you'd like to add anything else briefly that you may like to be specific about, but I think we've heard quite a bit about that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor, and I'm already thinking, of taking the area plan to the Blaenavon Older People's Forum. So that'll be an opportunity to link in 2 birds with 1 stone.
Okay, yes. Thank you. That question had been answered, I think, prior in the meeting. So thank you for elaborating anyway. And okay, so I'd like to ask Veronica to ask the next question, please.
Thank you. We're looking at it now from a slightly different perspective, Phil. because the PNA as a whole identifies the needs of our population and therefore treatments. However, it doesn't mention or address the number of services or staff and support to treat these needs. We know there's tremendous staff shortages in all sorts of professions and services. How are you going to cope with those?
Very observant of you, Councillor. Gold star, look for picking that up, because definitely the workforce is by far one of the biggest issues and areas of need for us going forward, especially across health and social care. We have a workforce development board, and the final publication of the PNA will include an element of service mapping, setting out some of the services and partnerships that we have in place. Due to the pandemic, it has impacted on us. Normally we would have had a year's lead-in to develop the PNA. So that element has been delayed slightly. However, with the wellbeing assessment, if I just jump over to the Public Service Board, their legislation sets out that they highlight need, and then the response to that need will come post-April, whereas the PNA has to do a bit of both. So I think the workforce will feature, or it's certainly been addressed nearly at every meeting I go along to. Workforce is coming up. It will feature. There's elements of it within the PNA in terms of workforce, but that needs to be a lot more pronounced. We recognise that, but I think where we really need to get to grips with the workforce is the area plan. Because actually it's when we start talking about delivery is where workforce will come up a lot more. So I'd like to think within the PNA it will be highlighted to a sufficient standard, but in terms of that response, that's definitely something for the area plan. But I can assure you there's no bigger priority and no bigger discussion point in the meetings that I go along to than workforce.
Yes, I can appreciate that. I know the other members on the panel can too. Thank you.
Faye, would you like to ask the next question, please?
I'm just wondering, is Councillor Clarkson coming in before me?
Oh yes, sorry, yes, Councillor Clarkson first, sorry.
I think, again, Phil has already, in his very comprehensive responses, answered some of this question. I was going to ask about the flexibility built into the regional plans, because if something we've learned from COVID is it's how uncertain times can affect us and how we need to adapt very quickly. So you've already sort of explained to us that you can refine and review the plan midway, and you're looking at doing that on an annual basis now. That didn't come across as very clear in the PNA, so that was my question, was about flexibility and responding to uncertainties, and
and if I can come back in there, I must admit that's something that I may not have thought about had it not been for this scrutiny meeting. You've certainly teased that out and highlighted as a priority. So this just highlights the benefit of bringing documents such as the PNA through this process, because actually it's quite positive that you were able to pull out some actions that maybe that we hadn't thought about. So no, thank you for that. That's definitely something that, like I said, I've written down and will be aiming to take forward.
Okay. So,
thanks, Phil.
Yeah, Faye, would you like to come in now? And I apologise, Linda, I didn't mean to omit you.
Thanks. All right, how will we ensure consistent provision across the borough? Does it need to be consistent, or will further needs assessment be carried out on a more local basis?
Yes, definitely. When we come down to delivering the area plan, there will invariably be sort of towns, villages that may need to be prioritised over others. But I think that's just a part of the maturity of working. And to give you an example of that, Torfaen were very much led on the development of the MIST service here. We're we're the first local authority in the region to develop that. And because of the success of the MIST project, the other 4 local authorities also took note and looked to replicate. So when we looked at using some of the ICF funding to develop MIST services across Gwent, we had to possibly put a little bit more time and effort and funding into other areas to bring them up to the level of Torfaen. So that has, there are examples of where that have happened. Now, on the flip side of that, when it's coming to look at developing residential units for Torfaen young people, we're looking at a site in Newport called Windmill Farm. So in that case, it's vice versa. It's looking at Newport. I've got that facility, and we will be tapping into that. And I think that comes through good partnership working, good practice that is identified, and trying to share that across the region. But it will definitely be a factor when we come to that area plan. And for instance, we may need pilot projects in some areas to test out new ideas before we roll out across the region.
Thank you for that. While we're talking about partnerships, do we do a lot of partnership work with the police? I'm thinking on young people and drink and drug abuse and things like that. And you get a lot for the PNA through those sort of partnerships. And have we got any weaknesses with any partnership?
The links with the police are not as good as it maybe come up wrong. I'd like to see a lot more. The police are not named as a statutory partner within the PNA and the Regional Partnership Board, but we do work very closely with them. Their agenda, and then maybe this is where we're looking at working smarter, their agenda is very much under the Public Service Board, under the old community safety partnerships. That legislation and accountability and governance is through the PSBs. So in one way, we don't want to duplicate efforts, and we linking with the police around the safeguarding board, again a regional board. So they are good links, but sometimes it would be easy to miss for us in the Regional Partnership Board because they're not named as a partner. However, in this area in Gwent, we have obviously been quite proactive. For instance, we have a Regional Children and Families Board, which has the Police Crime Commissioner, Deputy Police Crime Commissioner attends. We have developed a safeguarding hub approach during the last PNA. This is where we have a police officer based in the same room as a social worker. That was piloted in Newport and has actually been extended across the region. And I know that's the safeguarding hub, the MASH, is also in Torfaen as well within the civic centre. So again, good example of a project working well in one area and scaling up. There's also an early help regional group which has the social services, the police and the health board come together as well. So yes, we have good links with the police. I would have liked the Welsh Government legislation to have reflected that when developing the PNA.
Thank you.
Veronica, would you like to ask the last question, please?
Yes, thank you, Richard. Phil, this really pulls everything together that you've been working towards as we've gone through the questions. So finally, how are we going to know for certain that we've achieved what we're setting out to achieve, that we're addressing the needs of our population? Are there, for example, any needs that you think might come up in the next few years that we're going to have to look at?
I think in terms of knowing if we've had an impact, that will come through the monitoring of our action plans, and they need to be outcome focused, not just quantitative, how many times we complete an assessment, how many times we deliver training, a workshop for parents, etc. So outcome focused is key for us, and that will tell us if we are delivering, whether the PNA is accurate and we're delivering priorities. And again, going back to previous comments around co-production, we need to be regularly linking and working with our citizens to monitor, to find out how services are progressing. Is it having an impact? Is it not? So that for me is how we will know. In terms of trying to forecast maybe what the issues are in the future, it's yeah, I mean, I just think of the pandemic, really. If you'd asked me this question 2 years ago, you know, you don't know what's around the corner, do you? But I think what we have to have is a mechanism where we can regularly pick up and address that need. Like I said, the PNA only has to be completed once every 5 years. Well, that's far too long a time scale. So at the prompt of yourselves and what you've sort of discussed today and has given us food for thought, maybe we do that on an annual basis. So give regular check-in points, area plans, and through our citizen panel as well.
Thank you. I think we've all found your answers really very frank and open, and it's given us all a lot of food for thought as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Faye, do you want to come in?
Yes, just going back to partnerships, what do we do with education exactly? Because I think education holds a lot of information, and a lot of citizens come through education and their thoughts of how some things might be going wrong or whatever. And are the partnerships stretched out across the county council as they should be? Should there be more partnerships working? Thinking of things like family centres and things.
Yeah, I think in terms of budgetary pressures, we have to work in partnership. We have to pool resources. We have to create synergy. How can we come together collaboratively and work better and produce more in collaboration than we would individually? So definitely in terms of education, we have an education representative on our RPB to ensure that schools and young people's voice are key to discussions. It's the director from Monmouthshire, Will McLean, who sits on the board, and he represents the voice of the 5 education directors. We've considered the healthy schools approach. That's definitely having a massive impact in terms of children's health, mental health and well-being, emotional well-being. And again, we need to be working with partners, because duplication, we cannot afford to duplicate efforts and try to repeat programs that are already well established. We need to be supporting them as opposed to trying to go it alone. I think where the legislation is helpful, it brings us together around the table. And like I said, the Gwent region has a good tradition of partnership working. The Children and Families Board, the Regional Carers Board were well established and meeting long before the RPB and PNA ever came into existence. And I think that's testament to not just local authorities wanting to work together and the Health Board, but also testament actually we need to do this for our citizens. Could we offer them a better support and service if we do it together? And I think definitely, that's something that we will harness going forward within the RPB.
Thanks. Could I just ask one last thing? Sorry. I noticed when we were looking at the statistics that Monmouthshire have less high mental health problems now than perhaps, say, we do and one or two of the other authorities. So would the mental health monies be targeted to sort of one or two authorities where they're needed, or would more work be put into those areas?
I mean, definitely where there's an acute need in particular areas, then, we would be looking to address that, definitely. And whereas, yes, it might be mental health, but then Monmouthshire may have a bigger issue with dementia because of the average age of people resident in Monmouthshire may be slightly higher than, say, Newport. So, we need to recognise that. And I think previously where, local authorities would have come together, they would have had a grant from Welsh Government and they would have just split it up and sort of said, OK, well, we'll take our portion, you take your portion. What the Regional Partnership Board enables is a wider discussion, and it's very, humbling and enlightening to be in a meeting where, some directors will say, well, actually, do you know what, you've got a bigger issue than us. I think you need a bigger share in terms of the domiciliary care, because you're really struggling with recruitment for whatever reason. And then that works the opposite way then, because actually then when it comes back to mental health or carers, you know, directors remember that and said, okay, look, we helped you out. You know, you had a bigger share of the funding because you've got bigger issues in mental health. When it comes to carers, obviously, you know, another local authority would have a bigger share, etc. Like I said, I don't think we should take that for granted. That doesn't happen in all areas of Wales. You know, it can be quite parochial in one sense and sort of just insular. So I think that's testament to the work of the 5 authorities as well.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for attending the meeting, Phil. You've answered our thematic and our precise questions with aplomb. I would now like to invite you to leave the meeting so the committee can formulate its recommendations, which you will receive at some point after the meeting, and so will the executive members whose portfolios include the services we've looked at today. So thank you very much. We've welcomed your attendance, and you were very knowledgeable about every question that we asked you. So I'd like to leave the meeting now, and thank you very much.
Can I just thank you all as well? Thank you, Chair, and thank you all. The questioning and the point you've raised have been quite useful, well, very useful for me in testing out the PNA, ensuring it's fit for purpose, but also some new ideas for me to expand on as well. So I look forward to your recommendations. The PNA will be a better document for your comments. So I'll thank you for that. And I look forward to catching up, hopefully, some of you in the future as well, especially the Blaenaf and Older People's Forum, and when we bring the area plan back. And I think, obviously, I'll just highlight, obviously, myself and Natasha will now leave the meeting. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the scrutiny activity is on page 6 of the agenda, item 8 and 8.1. Would you like to talk us through the 3 scrutiny bullet points, Rebecca? You're on mute, Rebecca. Sorry.
Apologies, Chair. I don't know why that clicked off then. Okay, so if I refer you to point 8 with your scrutiny activity, that sets out that the Healthier Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee is invited to review the content of the population need assessment as a reflection of need across Torfaen and consider content in relation to regional wellbeing assessment produced by the Regional Public Service Board to determine whether the PNA reflects the local authority area and to provide comments to the exec member. So, members, do you have any recommendations that you've pulled together before I comment on any notes that I've made?
Okay, Linda wishes to come in first.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the one that screamed out from the beginning to the end is the need for the more frequent review. They build in that it's an annual review. He picked up on the point that we brought up when we were talking yesterday about 5 years being a long time. So I think that's a really important recommendation, is that to be a flexible plan and to reflect changing needs, that it needs to be reviewed far more frequently.
Thank you, Councillor Clarkson. Yeah.
Okay, a few hands up because Rose is below Linda on my screen. I'll go to Rose next, and then Faye, and then Janet. So Rose first.
Thank you, Chair. I think we picked up on the marketing issue. We also picked. I did the Public Service Board scrutiny, so I've listened to Phil twice in a week. So, but we'd actually picked up on the marketing, both of the PSB, but also of the public needs assessment, and the need to get the the knowledge out there into the community, what it's all about. So I think we need to have a recommendation around the marketing or the promotion of the PNA.
Okay,
I've also got one of highlight or asterisk, and probably Becky picked it up, is the mapping of the workforce, the area plan.
Yeah.
I thought you might have picked that up. I'll let others come in now.
Okay, thank you, Rose. Faye, like to come in, please?
Going back to Rose's point, I just wonder, could we include community councils? We're doing the Old People's Forum in Blenavon. Could we make sure that this is taken to community councils as well as part of our outreach service? The other thing was, when I asked him about his work with the police, he did start by saying that he would have liked there to be more legislation around work with the police. So I wondered, could that be some sort of recommendation that partnerships be shored up, and perhaps from the Welsh Government they could ask for more legislation to make sure they can work closer with bodies such as the police?
Yeah, I picked that one up as well. The police are not reflected. They're not a statutory partner, are they?
Yeah.
Is it correct that they're not a statutory partner on the regional partnership board, but they are a partner on the Gwent Public Service Board? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what he explained.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I did think he felt, though, that he didn't get quite as much information as he would have liked, or as much input.
Yeah, it's sort of something that needs modernising, last sort of going off, if that makes sense. One of the last bits to catch up, the PSB.
Yeah, I think he also said that it works well in Torfaen, but it could be that it doesn't work well in, say, Newport or another area. So if that recommendation goes through to Welsh Government, they may look at it. So.
Yeah.
Okay, Janet, like to come in, please?
You're on mute.
You're muted this time, Janet.
Still muted, Janet.
Sorry about that. I said all the questions I highlighted have already been asked, but the one thing to point up is the importance, as he said, of the disability housing, and how, the impact of Brexit has had an impact on that. So can we highlight that as well, please?
Okay, I don't. Oh, Rose, want to come in again? Hands up, please.
Apologies, Chair. It was a legacy hand. I do have one on the graphs, if that's
right. Okay. Yes.
It's just that I think the up-to-date, we need more up-to-date graphs, whether or not that goes along on a year-to-year basis when they're available. He said some were available next month from the census, but the graphs data was pretty aged in this document.
Yes, I thought that some of the statistics were historical and not contemporary, and we needed the contemporary statistics to really understand our population needs. We can't act retroactively on the needs calculated a decade ago, can we? So I think that certainly should go forward as a recommendation, Rose.
Yeah, especially post-pandemic, it's knocked everything out of kilter.
Yeah.
And we need to remember that the census was during pandemic, so
yes.
The information may well be very skewed that they get, which comes out next month, the initial information, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Faye, like to come in again, please?
I made some notes on the side here, and it's from what he said, and he said area plans need to be developed and delivered. So have we got any way of checking on that and the delivery?
So I think that goes back to that first recommendation with regards to the annual reviews. So keeping a monitor on how it's being delivered. So yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, if no one else wants to come in, Rebecca, have you annotated the recommendations from members, and do you have any recommendations that you have formulated during the meeting?
No, thank you, Chair. Members have covered off all the recommendations that I had noted down. The only other one point that I might make, and just so that you might want to put in the comments, not really a recommendation, but obviously there's also reference to the cross-referencing with the wellbeing plan, and obviously you considered this item as chairs at the PSB scrutiny last week. So just perhaps a comment that whether there be some sort of referrals back or some reporting back to the healthier committees, just to keep that link so that you're both aware of the workings on both sides.
Yeah. There was one other point I asked, Chair, I'm sorry, and that was the link with the link with as many citizens groups as possible. He thought that there was a better consultation process. He said he could keep going 24/7, didn't he? So obviously there's been difficulty during COVID, but to pick up on as many groups as possible.
Thank you, members. So
that might come under the marketing one as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So unless there's anything else, obviously the second point then, scrutiny activity asks you to determine whether the PNA reflects the local authority area. So am I on your behalf referring that yes, you do, as the information that you have there to date, you feel it does accurately reflect, but based on future annual reviews? Yeah?
Yes, certainly.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so if we have formulated all our recommendations to go forward, I can move on to the last agenda item, which is the date of the next meeting, which is in quite a short space of time. I think that is because this was a special meeting, wasn't it?
That's correct, Chair. Yes, this was called as a special meeting.
That had to be scheduled so the cabinet and then the council could sign off the PNA.
That's correct.
So the next meeting is on the 1st of March, which is St David's Day. So everyone has to wear a daffodil or a leek.
We got St Patrick's Day and St David's Day.
You'll regret saying that, Richard. You'll regret saying that.
Okay.
Something might appear with a large leak.
I'm off looking for a leak.
Okay. Okay, so thanks, members, for attending. Thank you, Rebecca, for facilitating the meeting. And thank you, Geraint, solely in the chamber again, recording the meeting. So I'll see you all soon, and have a nice weekend, everybody.
Thank you, Chair, and you too.
Bye all.
And everyone,
Bye.